This is Writer's Voices. I'm your host, Monica Hadley. And with me now is Kimberly Braun, author of Love Calls, Insights of a Former Carmelite Nun. Kimberly will be speaking Saturday, July 8th, 2017 at Revelations Bookstore at 1:30 p.m. And she's here visiting Fairfield. So we're going to learn a little bit more about what brings Kimberly to Fairfield and about her journey as a former Carmelite nun. So welcome to Writer's Voices, Kimberly.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
All right. I'm going to actually switch mics because I don't think that one's going to do it for me here.
Okay.
Here. There you go. Okay, that's better.
I'll say thank you again.
All right.
Great to be here.
Yeah, I have a little trouble sometimes with that particular one.
It's nice to be heard.
Isn't it, though? Now, you spent many years mostly in silence, however. Did you not?
I did, yes. As a Carmelite, we lived in silence. So we didn't take a vow of silence, but the rhythm of our day was couched in silence, and we spoke infrequently.
Now, this book is the first of 3. Is that true?
That's correct.
And are they all done, or
they are complete? I haven't published the other 2. They're in queue.
Okay.
And I'm just waiting a little bit longer. And the other 2 are going to be much hardier. This is a very light read, kind of an entry point into a relationship around how we get to know ourselves in silence.
And so this covers a period of time mainly from college through 10 years not even 10 years, just the first
4
year.
and a half.
4.5 years
right.
as a nun. Yeah.
Right. 6 more to go.
And so, of course, the question is, why did you leave? Because you write about it. You seem to love the experience.
I did love the experience. I'm really fortunate in that I was experiencing an inner love affair. In my language, spirit was so awakening within me at the center of my being. So my life had already become incredibly contemplative. I was living virtually in community in Santa Cruz, California, and we were all having heightened experiences, taking us into really deep places. So my joining the monastery was just wanting to be with the beloved. It was that simple. And I never looked back. This book ends after taking solemn vows, which is a vow you take and you stay in that monastery usually for life, or at least within the order. And I never looked back. But as we grow and change, my inner landscape changed as I opened more and more to the experience of love within me. And in that came a new direction coming from the same place of inspiration. So that illumination to leave came about 9 months before I actually did leave. Mm-hmm. Right. And I felt that it was, though, very much the same reason I entered. So whereas it was a dramatic change outwardly, it was just staying the course inwardly.
Interesting. Now, did your superiors in the order look at it that way?
They didn't look at it that way at all, for a couple reasons. First, I'm a young nun, and they love new vocations and all of that. Second, I fit. I am a contemplative by nature, and so it was like being a fish in water. So in their mind, I was meant to stay. But thirdly, and probably most strongly, the theology with taking solemn vows, it's a serious move to leave. And there was a feeling that I was losing my way. Mm. So there was, and I understood that. And it was coming from hearts that were truly grieving the thought that I was leaving.
Yeah. And I will say, reading through this, there isn't any sense of that you're criticizing the Carmelites in any way.
Thank you. Right, right.
Yeah.
I think, I'm 100% about making our life choices from a place that it's between us and our greater selves. And I made the choice very freely in entering. So everywhere we go, there's strengths and weaknesses, and we're all human beings.
Right.
So, but ultimately...
Isn't that the truth?
Right. And we all know what that means.
Yes, yeah. None of us are quite perfect yet.
That's right. Yet, right? Even using that word is evidence. So no, I don't have any criticism. It remains a very deeply enriching time of my life and comes into everything I do.
Now, I got a little bit confused sometimes on the chronology
Sure.
of things, but I know that you were at Steubenville, which is Franciscan University in
Yes.
Steubenville, Ohio. My 3 nephews have attended. 2 of them graduated from there, and one is there now. And the oldest one is now, well, he's home for the summer, or he's in Iowa for the summer, but he's in seminary in Rome after having graduated from the priestly discernment program at Steubenville.
Wow, powerful, a powerful university.
Yeah.
For sure. And I was there back in the late 80s, and I actually only attended a semester. So when a lot of things were exploding for me interiorly, I was in California. And I started dating a man who had graduated from Steubenville. And having grown up in a family that was very big into the charismatic gifts of spirit, when I heard about Steubenville, I longed to go. So when I first did gain acceptance there, my thought was to take it all the way through. But again, my life was transcending is not a good word. It was expanding. It was expanding at such a rate that it seemed silly. And I had a great spiritual director who could see the movement and how authentic it was within me. It's like, well, you don't need a degree to be a Carmelite. And it was so clear that I was being called to that.
And yet the first monastery that you applied to, that you were accepted, but then...
Wasn't that
they changed
strange?
Their minds, yeah.
Right, that's right in the intro. I think that was a setup for me to have that inspiring moment in liturgy. I was really devastated because I had put all my eggs in that basket. And when they had said yes, I was simply entering for what would be a time of trial anyway. So from my mind, it was a yes all the way along. To hear that they were really thinking, and I think what they were doing is they were getting a lot of women who were having wonderful experiences at Steubenville, and the monasteries that were not far away, there were Franciscan, there were Carmelite, Dominican. Lots of us women were flooding. And I would imagine, I never asked them, that from their standpoint, they were probably beginning to think, maybe everybody needs to get their degree. Instead of it being personal to me, more of like a unilateral, let's just take a step back because all these women are wanting to enter and I'm so on fire with love. And
yeah. Are there young women today still entering the monasteries, the convents?
Less and less.
Yeah.
Less and less. And since I've left, I haven't kept as close a tabs. But I think with how diverse opportunities are for men and women to live in community, to explore the contemplative aspects of themselves, there are options that are more flexible to the education of the people that are out there today. A lot of the monasteries, and I wouldn't want to make an overgeneralization, but because many are older, aren't as able to be as current and relevant.
Oh, yes.
Because the life is very secluded. And so I know even when I entered, there wasn't a big openness to computers coming on the scene and all sorts of other things. So I think that's probably to the detriment.
Now, Kimberly, why did you decide to write Love Calls?
I had a feeling all along that I would end up writing something that was semi-memoir based. I've been working with thousands of people over these years, and most of the time it's the story upon the story. So I come into contact and I'm presencing someone's story, and celebrating where spirit is there, where source is there. And a lot of times when people can relate to your own story, it lets them touch deeper places within themselves. I didn't think it'd be my first book out. I think I'll have many books. I love to write. And I thought I would be writing something just more abstracting from all of my work and less intimate in the details. But I built a monastery in Texas in the latter part of being a Carmelite, and that was such a dramatic story. I realized I needed to get that written down or I was going to forget the miracles that happened. Yes, it ends before you get there.
Yes.
I'm walking out the door to Texas in this book, and everyone that's read the book is like,
I also realized I forgot to really introduce you.
Oh, right.
You know, Kimberly's, so a little bit about Kimberly. Her contemplative leanings began around the age of 5. She spent 10 years as a Carmelite nun living in Monastery. Her master's in theology was completed in 2001 and is concentrated upon the adult spiritual journey. She enjoys officiating ritual, offering playful, inspiring keynotes, writing articles and books, and leading retreats. Her TEDx talk gives a taste of what it means to live a yes, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what that means, and is the inspiration for books 2 and 3 in this trilogy. And you are meditation faculty at Omega Institute, and her website is KimberlyBraun.com. That's KimberlyBraun.com. So what is living
your yes?
Yes. Living your yes.
Right. I know and for some people that's a little tricky since we're working on setting boundaries nowadays and not giving too many yeses.
Yeah.
My explanation of that concept is that at our very center, at the soul center, is spirit, is source. And we live most fully when we say yes to that impulse or that inspiration within. So the yes is a continual response to what's already arising within us. And that allows everything in our lives to come into alignment. So wherever we may have resistance, confusion, dissolution, and the full range of challenges that we as human beings all have, the more we move into our yes, the more we come from a place in relationship to these challenges that dissolves that and creates a life-giving quality of presence.
How do you discern when something is coming from that point and not external? You know, where the motivation for something is.
That is such a great question. I would tease out more questions. I would see it more on an individual basis, that there is a way of moving through the layers to discern and discover. And some of the obvious simple ones are the sense of rightness and easefulness. I think life is meant to have ease, even when we have great challenges. But it's very challenging, I know, to discern when we're coming from that place. This is a funny story, I came into direct contact with how impure my motives of charity were my first 2 years in the monastery, because I feel my call is to be love. So that's at the core, and I think that's true and authentic and honest. In that process of being and becoming love, I have found in some very funny ways how impure all my motives around being loving and charitable were. How I was looking to please, how I was looking for connection, how I was looking to be affirmed. And there was a short time when I became debilitated with even being charitable, because I felt like I was perhaps doing something worse than something better because my motives were so impure.
You know, that just sparked in me a memory of my father telling me, now my father died many, many years ago when I was 21, so in 1981. So this was before that. And he he had some kind of unusual spiritual concepts and ideas throughout his life. He kind of would evolved. He never was part of a traditional religion. But I remember him saying something about that you really shouldn't give charity because it really wasn't for the other person's benefit. It was for yourself. So it was actually a selfish thing to do. And, I think that's part of the answer. I don't think that's the complete story.
Right.
But it is true that when we give, we are benefiting ourselves, and not necessarily from a impure way either.
Right. I came to that, but I needed to go through that little darkness.
Yeah.
So that I could actually learn that as a human being, our deep longings for connection, for belonging, for a sense of purpose, that these are prevailing desires that exist within all of us. And all the ways that we answer to it, even my realizing that, when I run to get this stool for this sister, even though I'm partly doing it because I love her and partly doing it because it's the good girl thing to do, that I shouldn't not do it.
Right.
That I'm participating in being human by recognizing and being vulnerable enough to say, well, I'm actually hoping to receive as well.
Well, and also think, this is kind of taking it another step, that the person who needs help or needs charity, and I'm thinking of this more in, sort of a societal level, is actually doing a service by giving me the opportunity to help them.
Right. I think it's in Deepak Chopra's 7 Spiritual Laws of Success and the Law of Giving. He speaks to the reality that giving and receiving are two sides of the same coin, that the universe is in dynamic exchange.
Yes.
And when we're participating, no matter what end of the exchange we're on or what capacity we're within, that's all part of the law of giving. And I would even take that further to say, because the divine is coming into form and celebrating itself, when we celebrate by being in connection that way, it's actually even the ineffable celebrating itself within us.
You're listening to Writers' Voices, and our guest today is Kimberly Braun, author of Love Calls, Insights of a Former Carmelite Nun. She will be speaking at Revelations Bookstore Saturday, July 8th at 1:30 p.m. Kimberly, would you like to read for a few minutes from the book?
Of course.
Yeah, let's do that.
I thought to read a poem.
Okay.
And then depending on your time, I could read a short little vignette.
All right.
And you can stop me anywhere. And if there's a part you liked, I'd be happy to read that too.
I like the potatoes.
The potatoes are great. If you can find that page, I'll read the potatoes.
Okay.
And maybe I'll start with this poem.
Okay.
Lip to lip, we suck the moment, tender, raw, free. A word plunges me into you. A phrase opens the dark door of discovery, and your light shows up softly, striding forward to take me. My shoes and dress fall off as my lips reach yours. Without touching you, I touch you, quivering. Without hearing your voice, I vibrate in its sound. Without and within I go, twisting and undulating in the rhythm of your love.
So 114.
Perfect. 114. I know that's such a great story, isn't it? Okay. Ooh, want me to start at one popular way?
Yes. Yeah.
One popular way, we ate a lot of potatoes. We lived off the land in North Dakota. I'll preface that. was pan-fried chopped potatoes. Sister Elijah mastered these years back, and now it was my turn. Mother Anna was specific in how they were prepared. Cutting them into half-inch naked white cubes was easy. Heating the oil and adding the potatoes was, of course, a piece of cake. The stress came when they needed to be turned. The first time I must have begun to turn the potatoes too soon. They were partially raw, but I thought they would cook through. 6 cups of potatoes needed to be fried in our skillet. Some of them did not even touch the oil. At the same time I was tending them, beets needed dehusking, carrots needed shredding, and custard needed to get into the oven. The potatoes were looking pretty bad, with some sides burning, others raw, and some not getting to meet the oil at all. Sweat formed all over my body as I flipped them, hoping for a miracle. They were turning into a disaster, which meant the community was going to have to suffer for it. Sometimes the meals we provided were the major consolation they had after long fasts and many hours of hard work. With the time for prayer upon us, the potatoes went into the warm oven with the hope they would be edible in 25 minutes. This would take the raw parts cooking and the burnt parts softening. I was asking for a miracle. Sext, that's a time of prayer, was a rigorous practice of turning my attention back to the present moment as it snapped like a rubber band to thoughts about the potatoes. Soon enough, we were in the refectory for our meal. The serving sisters whisked the warming towels off the food, revealing my potatoes half burnt, half raw. Since the youngest dished up last, it was impossible for me to sift through the worst ones for myself. After the meal and before the dishes, I was called into Mother Anna's office. I knew it, inwardly getting ready to hear what I dreaded to hear. Sister Annunziata, those potatoes! And I dropped to my knees and kissed the floor. She focused very little upon the mistake after that, telling me to get up. Immediately she began advising me on how to make them better. When you are making the potatoes, she began, first you leave them in the frying pan until the bottoms have just become golden brown. Do not flip or touch them until that point. Usually about 10 minutes. Her confident voice paused only briefly. Easy enough, I thought. This was not what I had done, but it made sense. After they brown on the bottom side, drop everything else you are doing and focus only on the potatoes, she went on. A huge "but" silently arose from my belly, stifled before it reached my mouth. Start flipping the potatoes in a slow, continuous motion, her long fingers, slightly bent through arthritis, yet elegant even in their age, modeled the motion. Keep flipping and do not do anything else until they are golden, and then quickly remove them. My mind zoned at this point as it burst into loads of defensive arguments. How can you tell me to drop everything else and also expect us to produce a meal for over 20 sisters? Have you ever worked in a kitchen like ours? Her instruction felt insensitive to how hard I try and how little time we have. Do you want me to go on, or is that probably time?
No, that's good.
I could paraphrase the rest.
Yeah. Why don't you do that?
It is such a funny story because that was 8 months into my time in North Dakota. I was still going to be there about 3.5 more years. And every time the menu came back and those potatoes were on the menu, she would put my name in red ink next to them. And because we lived in silence, even when I began producing them perfectly golden brown, I began to reel when I would see my name put beside the potatoes. My mind would go into all sorts of insecurities. Didn't she understand? Did I not do them well? Why can't this stop? I had discouragement and sadness and anger. And eventually the potatoes taught me a level of letting go that kept me in a place of equanimity to where I couldn't have cared less whether my name was put there or not.
And you also learned to make perfect potatoes.
So perfect. They were so perfect that she wrote me about them when I went to Texas. And I cried because all this time I thought I took it as a punishing thing.
As a criticism, as a punishment.
Criticism.
And do you think, and maybe she was putting your name there because she liked the way you made them and she wanted to have you make them so they'd be good?
It was totally my own projection.
Wow.
Yes.
Now, you also learned, like, as you were, improving, you learned certain lessons from it, or you absorbed certain things from it. Do you think that she had any idea that
she was being an instrument to my inner growth?
Yeah.
I think in a broad way, because our life was so focused only on spiritual growth, that she had confidence that her role as superior was an opportunity to experience grace. So yes, I think in that way, whether she had an intuitive sense that what she was doing was hitting me on all those levels, I don't know about that.
I mean, she was pushing your buttons, for sure.
She was really pushing my buttons. And she was the spiritual director too. And I would think that she usually heard disgruntlements from nuns. Now, I really went in wanting to experience the divine in everything. So I didn't have complaints. Whenever I note my complaints in here, it's because I'm noting my weakness, not because I think there's any validity to the complaint. And so that was my approach. So I never really went and, vented or got things off my chest. I really let it be a learning. And I think she had a sense of that level of commitment to myself. I know, funny. It was really funny.
Yeah. Do you still cook potatoes?
I love to cook. I learned so much about cooking living off the land. So yes, I do cook potatoes.
Now, Kimberly, where do you live now?
I live in Boulder, Colorado.
And what brought you to Fairfield? We only have like a minute or so for you to answer, but...
Twofold. I'm helping out Michael Morgan, who's an amazing cranial sacral therapist here in town, and he's helping prevent Alzheimer's. I'm helping him with what he's doing, his mission. And I came in to speak at Revelations because I'm on the road for 8 weeks. I'm speaking at churches and festivals all around the country.
And how's that been going so far?
I love it. Getting to connect heart to heart with people, getting to hear their stories. It's such a blessing. It's humbling.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And do you know much about the TM movement and transcendental meditation?
I would say peripherally.
The reason I'm curious about or wondering about that is because there's this, the TM movement has something that's sort of equivalent to this with women living in community. It's a temporary vow. It's not a permanent thing. It's called Mother Divine. But I think that probably they have very similar experiences to what you write about in here.
I would imagine. And I just had lunch with 2 women who have been part of that.
Oh.
So I am learning quick while I'm here, getting an immersion.
Well, Kimberly, thanks so much for being with us today. If you're listening on Friday, please go meet Kimberly at Revelations Saturday at 1:30. If you're listening to our Monday broadcast, you've missed it, but you can get the book at Revelations.
Absolutely.
Love Calls, Insights of a Former Carmelite Nun. And see you next week on Writer's Voices.